Have you ever thought to yourself, "Hey, that's a decent player, you know," and then suddenly bang, he's gone? Well, I guess that's the end of that YouTube video then. Are there any footballers that you have been a massive fan of, that have maybe even played for your club? You've seen them playing week in, week out on the TV, you've used them on FIFA Ultimate Team maybe, and then suddenly you have realised that you've got no idea where they went. Well, today we are taking a look at those players, the footballers that just disappeared. Trim, dead, hat on. Those are the rules.
You know the rules.
Much like my ability to actually get a decent haircut, some footballers have completely vanished. And there's some extremely high profile ones we're going to be going through today. But before we get into this, is there anyone that comes to mind early doors here? Let me know down in the comment section. Maybe we'll do a second version of this video as well. But please ensure you like the first version, like down below. Now, I think there's one, like, key contender. All right, straight off the bat here. We're not going to mess about. If you were a Chelsea fan... No! I'm officially broken! Between the years of 2012 and 2017, there was one young, Brazilian, exciting attacking midfielder that looked like he was going to be the future of the football club, scoring iconic goals in the Champions League and helping the Blues to a Premier League title. 2 of them, I believe, whilst he was at the club, and that is the man with one name, Oscar. His surname disappeared and so did his entire body. Now, this kid made 131 league appearances for Chelsea and was really liked by Jose Mourinho. But then Antonio Conte joined the Blues and said he wasn't as keen on the young Brazilian as Jose was, and Oscar was gently phased out of the side. Now, this was in 2017, and elsewhere across the globe, a key incident was occurring. China decided they liked football, and so with that, Oscar was offered a shiny new deal in the Chinese Super League for Shanghai SIPG. That stands for Shanghai International Port Group. There were big payouts. There was the opportunity to become an icon in another continent, and also a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, this kid's weekly salary was verging £400,000, which put him into the top 4 of highest earning footballers across the globe. Now, generally speaking, Oscar was really well liked over in China by fans of the club that he signed for. This was, of course, during the boom of the Chinese Super League. He got 12 goals in his second season that helped Shanghai SIPG win the league, and then won a second title for the side in 2023. And that really kind of answers the question. A lot of people have asked where Oscar's gone. He didn't go anywhere. When a lot of players left the Chinese Super League once the funding stopped and once a lot of rules and restrictions came in terms of signing foreign players, a lot of other players left, like Carlos Tevez, like Marek Hamšík, people like Yannick Ferreira Carrasco. They all dipped or came back to Europe or headed somewhere else. But despite interest from Barcelona, Oscar was happy to stay in China, though there is news that he will be leaving the club in the summer of this season, and you never know, maybe making a return to Europe. Now, another player that made an appearance in China is Alexander Pato. If you were to search failed wonder kids, right, in a dictionary, page 1, Ojan. Yeah, it would be him, realistically. It wouldn't be Pato. Page 2, Freddie Adu, probably, actually, thinking about it. He's in the book, right? That's all you need to know. The dictionary that you have in this topic of a general piece of literature, Alex Pato is there, all right? He should have achieved a lot more in his career based on the promise that he had when he was at AC Milan. Bursting onto the scene in true Micah Richards fashion.
The problem for you was you burst off the scene.
With a ridiculous solo goal in the Champions League against Barcelona. He scored 12 goals in 23 games in the 09-10 season, that being in Serie A. In 2010-2011, he continued to tear it up. He was on a massive high for both Milan, and he was doing well for Brazil as well. But then, unfortunately, like a lot of failed wonder kid stories, injuries would start to hit. Massive hamstring problems in the 11-12 season meant that he would miss 26 Serie A games and score just 3 goals. The next campaign, 2012-13, he would be involved in just 4 games, getting no full 90 minutes under his belt. And truthfully, his goals record just started to dry up from this point, you know, having already been affected by his injury record. He got 9 goals in 30 for Corinthians, 14 in 62 for Sao Paulo, 1 solitary goal on a random loan spell to Chelsea. He then made 14 appearances in La Liga for Villarreal, went to China to play alongside the likes of Oscar, bringing the goals back, but obviously in a much lesser and competitive league, 30 goals in 47, before spells back at Sao Paulo again, Orlando City in the MLS, and a third spell at Sao Paulo in Brazil, playing 9 games and getting 2 goals before being released for 2024. A player you won't necessarily think has disappeared if you've been keeping up to date with South or North American football, but I think for a lot of people, they did wonder where Alex Pato went after that loan spell at Chelsea. Next up, though, and we've got the drip doctor Manchester's very own. It's Samir Nasri. Now, Samir Nasri is kind of almost known for having a very short prime anyway. Those couple of seasons at Arsenal were insane, but he was also slapping it early on in his career at Marseille. He's done the business as a youth graduate. I think there's a picture of a young him with like Hatem Ben Arfa and Karim Benzema at youth level for France, and eventually be picked up by Arsene Wenger's Arsenal. And he was going crazy in the early years, scoring some iconic goals for Arsenal. One against Manchester United really sticks out. Things started to tail off a little bit towards the end. 10 goals in 30 in his final season, but not terrible, just not quite the same peak. Only for him to then join Manchester City.
Judas!
For 25 million though for Manchester City, he didn't do too badly, especially kind of as a rotation option, but his last 2 seasons at the club were an absolute nightmare. His 13-14 season was solid, 11 goals and 12 assists in all competitions, but a hamstring injury in the 15-16 season kept him out for 5 months, and the injuries kept coming the year after, and off the back of that he'd end up on a loan spell at Sevilla, playing 23 times for the Spanish club and grabbing just 2 goals. This was the beginning of the end really for things, as he then made a move over to Turkey and Antalyaspor, then returned back to England for a little spell at West Ham, playing just 5 times. He was a complete flop there, not gonna lie. His fitness was shocking. And then a move to Anderlecht in 2020 before retiring. But during all of this time, right, and I think one of the key moments in Samir Nasri's career was when his wife logged onto his Twitter account and accused him of cheating with a medical professional that he'd been seeing. The drip doctor scandal was absolutely mental. Samir was buzzing, to be fair, when he found out what the drip in drip doctors stood for. The fall off was mad. The situation was crazy. He said he got hacked. Yeah, you did get hacked by your wife. And he was driving out of that house as quick as possible when the evidence emerged.
Sammy, you are wrecking the car.
Now, similar story is coming up to one that I've already told you here. Because if you watched any of Oscar's time at Shanghai SIPG, you'd have seen one of his other teammates over there. Givanildo Vieira dos Santos. I don't think anyone's actually ever said his full name. Like, even his dad. AKA Hulk. This guy might even just go down in footballing folklore. Basically, for having the weirdest footballing career of all time. And he started early, alright? This guy started his professional career at Vitória in Brazil. And straight off the bat, things were moving left. Where would any young Brazilian footballer head to further their career at a tender age? That's right, a loan spell in Japan.
Not another one?
He went to Kawasaki Frontale early on in his career on loan, was then signed permanently, and then loaned to the 2nd division of Japanese football. There he played for Consadole Sapporo and Tokyo Verdy. It's Verdy's football club. He scored 37 in 42 games and then was signed by them permanently instead of being given an opportunity in the 1st division. Not entirely sure why. And then somehow from there ended up washing up on the shores of Porto. Now this is really where Hulk's career started to kick off. This is where people started to actually know who he was, right? In the general circles of football. He was really impressing in the Portuguese league. This was still at like an early-ish age. He wasn't like a wonder kid at this point, but he was young enough to be still before his prime, if that makes sense. He was absolutely killing it for Porto, okay? The big leagues in Europe are after this man. They're circling like piranhas, which is why he went to Zenit St. Petersburg in Russia. Fucking hell. Yeah, so one thing you need to know about Hulk, really, is he kind of chased the money wherever he went. Now, Zenit St. Petersburg and the Russian Premier League, actually, at this time, was a relatively all-right league. It was like a slight downward step, maybe, from the Portuguese league, but in terms of the actual footballing ability, it wasn't worlds away in terms of actual standard, but what you would have expected would have been a move upwards in trajectory. What you then may be able to see coming at this point is a trip to the Chinese Super League. Once again, his numbers were great, all right, but again, he wasn't in a very competitive league. He stayed there for 4 years, raked up the money at Shanghai SIPG alongside Oscar, but when that money dried off, he decided to head on back home for a wholesome journey to Brazil, a nation that, despite being Brazilian, he'd only played 4 games in at this point in his career. Now, he's played a heck of a lot more games now for them. He's been there for over 3 years, playing for Atletico Mineiro, but realistically, it's fair to say that after his initial move to China, he did kind of drop off the radar, really, apart from the fact that he has kids with his ex's niece.
I beg your pardon?
Fucking hell, what is it about these Brazilians? He has got Neymar as an emergency contact in his phone book. You know what? I almost respect it for keeping his family tree as complicated as his footballing career. I don't respect it at all. Now, Hulk made a splash at Porto. It's fair to say Adel Taarabt didn't quite make as much of an impact at their rivals Benfica. Now, you may be listening to that and thinking, I didn't even know Adel Taarabt played for Benfica. Well, he didn't for quite some time, but we'll get onto that in a second. The Moroccan was known for being an unbelievably skillful player, all right? The streets were quite literally paved for this man, all right? They will never be forgetting him. He came through Lonza's youth academy and was in the end scouted by Tottenham, who brought him in on loan originally, then signed him permanently, really kind of looking to sell him on as a youngster for a profit. But in his short time there, he made a serious impression, at least on Anthony Gardner anyway. But his attitude let him down quite significantly, and in the end, he'd make a move to Championship side QPR. This, though, is where he ignited his career. He had perhaps one of the greatest Championship seasons of any footballer ever, with ridiculously unpredictable skill that made him look like he was playing in his back garden against 7-year-olds.
Get in there! Well done, he's 13.
This kid couldn't stop scoring, could not stop creating goals, could not stop breaking ankles. Honestly, it was one of the most exciting football seasons of any player ever, and it helped Queen's Park Rangers to the Premier League. He didn't quite live up to the hype, though, in the top flight, unfortunately, and that first season in the Championship will probably always be his best. Don't get it twisted, he was alright, but again, it was a story of a man that didn't really kick on when he could have done, and his attitude did let him down. Neil Warnock at one point saying that he couldn't pick him in 2015 because he simply wasn't running enough. He played in a reserve game, and Neil Warnock himself could have run more than Adel Taarabt did. I'd love to see Neil Warnock running in behind as an advanced forward. It's fair to say the kid was out of shape, and in the end, QPR ran out of time for him. He'd make a move to Portuguese side Benfica, but spent 7 months in their reserves team. But eventually, the attitude switched up. Something changed in Adel's head. He since became a relatively regular starter, though in a weird defensive midfield position. He was since released, though, by Benfica and now plays for Al Nassr in the United Arab Emirates. If you're wondering where Adel Taarabt went, he's still playing football, but his prime is unfortunately a little while behind him. Now, the story of Leicester winning the Premier League was an unbelievable one. The true underdog story, a side that almost got relegated the season before, beating all of the giants of English football and revolutionising an entire city. One of the key members of that side, Danny Drinkwater, the only footballer in this world to remind you to hydrate. But when Leicester were offered £35 million for Chelsea, they realised they'd absolutely rinsed the Blues. This move proved that Danny Drinkwater's form, although sensational, and his role in Leicester winning the Premier League is undoubted, was more of a purple patch or system player situation. He went to Chelsea for £35 million and played 12 games in 5 years. This man fell out of love at Chelsea quicker than a man not from England. And it's fair to say Chelsea fans were running out of faith with him.
This is my car keys. I will drive him to Gatwick myself.
He went out on loan to Burnley and played 1 time. He went out on loan to Aston Villa and played 4 times. The man could not get game time anywhere, then ending up in Turkey with Kazim Pasha and then playing, in fairness, 33 games for Reading in the 21-22 season, but since then has been a free agent. Someone get Danny Drinkwater a job, guys, come on. But don't get twisted, ladies and gentlemen, I've got plenty more examples here for you. Marek Hamšík, easily the maddest trim in this list, unless I take my hat off for scientific. Marek Hamšík, it's fair to say, is known and probably will forever be known as being a Napoli player. This man spawned at them and stayed there for a decade. 12 years, 400 appearances, 100 goals for the side based in Naples. The guy is a legend, a club legend. But after that, things got a little bit more hectic. A move to China, again, like Hulk and Oscar, playing for Dalian Pro. He stayed there for 2 years, then moved to Sweden, and IFK Göteborg, before a 2-year spell at Trabzonspor, and then his retirement. So, in fairness, Göteborg was still playing at a pretty high level. Andre Schürrle is one of the weirder examples in this video. A man that decided to just sack everything off at the age of 29. He, of course, had made a name for himself playing at Chelsea after a move from Bayer Leverkusen where he looked like an absolute wonder kid. Didn't quite go to plan, but still obviously a World Cup winner. After Chelsea, played for Wolfsburg and then Borussia Dortmund. Whilst at Borussia Dortmund, he had loan spells at Fulham and Spartak Moscow, but then at the age of 29, after having his contract terminated, he stated he was fed up of the loneliness and competitive nature of top flight football, which, you know, honestly is fair enough. Nowadays, you can see him hiking across mountains and shit. He'll probably be the next guy to run across the length of Africa.
Gotta be about it, though.
Papi Cisse might be the truest example of any footballer in this list, because I think a lot of people remember him at Newcastle scoring ridiculous goals and then have absolutely no idea where he ended up after that. Well, of course, he made a name for himself playing 100+ games for the Geordies, scoring some ridiculous goals. He is another player that ended up going to China. He played for Shandong Luneng, then went to Turkey for a couple of sides, including Fenerbahce. He last played for Amiens in France and is a free agent as things stand. He was most recently training with Macclesfield Town. An interesting development in the form of Babis Cisse there. Andrei Arshavin next up. He had a interesting career as well. A Russian international, a Russian legend as well. He made a name for himself in the Russian Pro League for Zenit St. Petersburg, and then of course moved to Arsenal. Famous for scoring 4 goals in a game against Liverpool. Especially when he first joined the Gunners, he was an absolute sensation. Things dried up a little bit after the original purple patch, and he then returned straight back to Russia and Zenit St. Petersburg. In 2015, he signed for Kuban Krasnodar, and then after that spent 2 years playing for a side called FC Kairat, who play in Kazakhstan. He won the Kazakhstani Super Cup in 2017, then announced his retirement the year after. Shinji Kagawa was an absolute baller, but he might well miss the Japanese golden generation that's about to arrive. A hero for Borussia Dortmund, he signed for Manchester United, but things didn't really work out. After his 2-year spell at the Red Devils, he'd moved back to the Bundesliga and Borussia Dortmund again. He spent about, I think in total probably like 75% of his career at the German side. For a loan spell at Besiktas, then Real Zaragoza, then PAOK Salonika in Greece. He played in Belgium and now is back playing in his native Japan at the age of 35. I can't imagine his career will last for too many more years from this point, but I'm sure he's still doing a solid job in Japan right now. Shame things didn't work out in the Premier League for him. But one man that was successful in the Premier League individually was Alex Song, a defensive midfielder that really did a great job for Arsene Wenger's Arsenal. He played for the Gunners for 6 years before moving to Barcelona and spent 4 years in La Liga with them as more of a backer. It was a high-profile move, so then was his loan spells at West Ham for the next 2 seasons. After that, he'd moved to the Russian Premier Division, signing for Rubin Kazan. He enjoyed his time there, then went to Switzerland to sign for FC Sion. Now, he disappeared at this point slightly already. This is where he really vanished, because at the age of 33, Alex Song made the interesting decision to sign for Arta Sola 7. If you don't know what that selection of words means, let alone the football club it's named after, that is a team that plays in Djibouti. You may not even know what that is as well. The Djiboutian Premier League, located in Djibouti, located in the east of Africa, is not really where you expect many former Barcelona players to end up. But that is exactly where Alex Song has been for the last 3 years. That was before announcing his retirement at the end of 2023. I hope you enjoy retirement. Let us know what the standard of Djiboutian Premier League football is, because I'll be honest, I don't know, Alex. But who have I missed off this list of footballers that disappeared from the face of the earth? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video though, feel free to slap a like on it, and of course subscribe if you are new to the channel. You can also follow me on social media. It is at officialfng on Twitter and on Insta. It's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.